Okay, so now we are on record, and today we are looking at inductive reasoning. Now, inductive reasoning is different from deductive reasoning. Now, let's look at a very important distinction between the two kinds of reasoning. Deductive reasoning is reasoning where the relationship between the premises and the conclusion is logical. So, like mathematics, the meanings of the contents do not matter. But inductive reasoning is where the relationship is not logical. So for deductive reasoning, the relationship between premises and conclusion is logical, but they are not logical in inductive reasoning. That's the major difference. It's just a difference of logic. Now, for inductive reasoning, it is possible to affirm all the premises and deny the conclusion without contradiction, because the premises are capable of producing more than one conclusion. So, inductive reasoning, you are not really sure of the conclusion. You are not quite certain that the conclusion is true. That's the issue with inductive reasoning. No conclusion of an inductive reasoning is guaranteed. You cannot swear on it. You can't stand by it. And in fact, some people say that inductive reasoning is nothing more than guesswork, or what do you call it, speculation, or you can even say it's extrapolation. So let's look at examples of, although we're coming to it. Now, inductive arguments. For inductive arguments, the premises provide reason for believing in the likelihood of the conclusion. Now, watch the language very well. The premises provide reason for believing in the likelihood of the conclusion, but the premises do not guarantee the conclusion. Now, inductive arguments are probability arguments. Because inductive arguments do not depend on rules, they are harder to evaluate. So my own definition is that inductive arguments are arguments saddled with more than one possible conclusion, because the premises support but do not guarantee the stated conclusion. So when you look at an inductive reasoning, you have premises and you have a particular conclusion that has been stated. But that stated conclusion on paper is not the only possible conclusion. There are other possible ones. Now, before we look at inductive reasoning, we need to clarify some terms. First of all, we have verifiable and confirmable statements. Now, verifiable statements are statements we can directly test or verify. They are usually factual or empirical statements. Of course, we did factual statements. And you know factual statements are empirical statements. Statements about the external world. Example, Kofi lost strength with age. Kofi lost strength with age. Now, Kofi lost strength with age is a factual statement. It's an empirical statement, and you can verify it, actually. If someone says Kofi lost strength with age, you can verify it by, if there are records of Kofi's strength in the past 10 or 20 years. And then you can measure Kofi's strength right now with the same method you measured it 10 or 20 years ago, and then you see whether it has reduced. So Kofi losing his strength with age is measurable and verifiable. So it's an empirical statement, a factual statement. Now, so we say it is a verifiable statement. But apart from verifiable statements, there are confirmable statements. Confirmable statements are statements that we cannot test or verify directly, except through verifiable statements. So there are certain statements we cannot test or verify directly, but we can use verifiable statements to try to confirm them. Example, all men lose strength with age. All men lose strength with age. You can't test it, because you are referring to all men. Many men have not yet been born, and no matter the period of history you are living, you are not sure you have witnessed the last man, so there is no way you can test all men, so when you are saying all men lose strength with age, you can't verify it, but you can use Kofi lost strength with age to make a sense of all men lose strength with age. If, for instance, you have Kofi lost strength with age, Peter lost strength with age, Michael lost strength with age, you have about 10 different people, men losing strength with age, then it can help you to try to make a sense of all men lose strength with age. But there's no way you can confirm, you can verify that all men lose strength with age. So we say that verifiable statements help you to confirm confirmable statements, but you cannot verify confirmable statements. So there's a difference between confirmation and verification. So that's the problem. Now look at this combination. We have 4 premises and a conclusion. The 4 premises are verifiable statements. And then the conclusion is a confirmable statement. So you have Kofi losing strength with age. Peter, Michael, and James, all of them they all lost strength with age. Then the conclusion is that all men lose strength with age. The premises are verifiable statements leading to the conclusion, which is unverifiable or confirmable statement. So that is the typical nature of inductive arguments. Although inductive arguments are not always like this, but they most of the time they share this characteristic, you know. And another thing is that inductive arguments are actually the arguments that are used for scientific investigations. If a scientist, for instance, says that malaria is a deadly disease, that malaria is a disease that kills, you can't verify malaria is a deadly disease directly, but you can verify whether malaria killed Peter, whether it killed Michael, whether it killed Amma, and also whether it killed Rebecca. So if you verify that malaria killed Peter, it killed Michael, Rebecca, and Amma, then that will help you to confirm or to at least support the conclusion that malaria is a deadly disease. So scientific investigations are made up of premises that are supposed to be the results of individual scientific investigations. They become the premises, and then the conclusion will be a hypothesis that scientists have been trying to confirm. Don't worry, we're going to see another example of that. But inductive reasoning is the kind of reasoning used in science and scientific investigations. The conclusion of inductive reasonings are also hypotheses. Hypotheses are confirmable statements. We will see that. And then you start your experiments. Those experiments will be producing premises, individual premises. Each experiment will produce a result, which is a premise. And at the end of the day, you assemble a number of premises and then see whether they support the conclusion. Now let's go ahead. Another example. Now look at this example. You have a number of premises that are verifiable statements, and the conclusion is confirmable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have 6 verifiable statements, and then you have a confirmable statement. Mary reached menopause by 40. Grace reached menopause by 35. Meredith reached menopause by 33. Rose reached menopause by 34. Edith reached menopause by 38. And Sophia reached menopause by 45. Therefore, half of all women will reach menopause by 35. Now, if you look at the premises, you see that 3 of these women reached menopause by 35 or before 35. And then the other ones reached menopause after 35. So because the premises are supporting 50-50, reaching menopause by 35, the conclusion then is that half of all women will reach menopause by 35. So if you look at this argument very well, you see that it looks like a scientific investigation, which is what I was talking about. Now, but what we're saying is that the relationship between the premises and the conclusion is not very logical, because the six women that were tested here, or the six women that were verified here, might not be representative of the entire population. The rest of the population might give you a different story. Six women cannot represent all women. You see? So, but let's move on. Two ways of detecting confirmable statements. Now, how do you detect a confirmable statement? How do you know a statement is confirmable? First of all, they are not directly testable or verifiable. So the first way to find out that a statement is not confirmable is to see that it is not verifiable. If it is not verifiable, then it is confirmable. Then the second way is that they can be converted into conditional statements. So any statement that is confirmable can be converted into a conditional statement. Example, look at this categorical statement. Now, no leader steps down from power unless compelled by a coup or constitution. That's a categorical statement. No leader steps down from power unless compelled by a coup or constitution. Now, you can convert it to a conditional statement. Now, to convert it to a conditional statement, if X is a leader, then X will not step down from power unless compelled by a coup or constitution. So what the conversion did is to take the subject or the reference class, no leader, and convert it to an if statement. No leader steps down from power. So if X is a leader, X will not step down from power. That's how to convert it to a conditional statement. If you're able to convert a statement into a conditional statement, then automatically that statement is a confirmable statement. You cannot convert a verifiable statement into a conditional statement because it can't work. For instance, it is not possible to convert directly testable statements into confirmable statements. A statement that is directly verifiable or testable cannot be converted into a conditional statement or version. For example, Kofi lost strength with age. That's a verifiable statement. Would you say if a man is called Kofi, then such a man lost strength with age? You can't say that, because that would mean that all men called Kofi are old, and there are no children or young people called Kofi, or there are no strong young people called Kofi. So you can't convert a verifiable statement into a conditional statement. It can't work. Once you are able to convert a statement into a conditional statement, then it's a confirmable statement. So those are the two ways to identify a confirmable statement. First of all, you would confirm that it is not directly verifiable. You can't verify it. And then secondly, you will find out that you are able to convert it to a conditional statement. Okay. Now, finite and infinite reference classes. You are supposed to have done this in deductive reasoning, but I'm happy I brought it up here again in inductive reasoning. Now, finite reference class refers to a class of countable members. For example, this copper, that man, some boys, that table. These are all countable items. But the infinite refers to uncountable items. Example, all metals, all men, all voters. Now, this distinction has a role to play in our study of inductive reasoning. So it's not only in deductive reasoning that you need this distinction. It is very important in inductive reasoning. Okay, for instance, look at this. There are two kinds of hypotheses. You have law-like and statistical hypothesis. Law-like hypotheses are confirmable statements that refer to all members of a class, which is the infinite reference class. All members. Example, all metals expand when heated. All metals expand when heated. If you want to convert it to a conditional, you will say if X is a metal, then X will expand when heated. Another example, all F's are G's. All F's are G's. That means each F is a G. Or you can also say no F's are G's. No F's are G's. That means that all F's are not G's. So law-like hypotheses are confirmable statements that refer to all members of a class. But statistical hypotheses are confirmable statements referring to some percentage less than 100% and more than 0%. For example, 90% of those who ate the food fell sick. 90% of those who ate the food fell sick. So 90% is a statistical term. But there are other statistical terms. You have some, you have few, many, most. They are all statistical terms. Well, I think I have to stop the transcription because the system has been transcribing, but unfortunately, this transcription is not always accurate. Now, let me mute everyone and continue. Okay, so statistical hypotheses are confirmable statements referring to some percentage less than 100 or more than 0. 90% of those who ate the food fell sick. That's a statistical hypothesis. Or if you say some of those who ate the food fell sick, that's a statistical. Or you say few of those or many of those who ate the food fell sick. Or you say most of those who ate the food fell sick. They are all statistical hypotheses. Now, but the law-like one is that all metals expand when heated. Or if you say all men, Yeah, so that's the law-like. Now, the distinction, the difference between law-like and statistical hypothesis is very important. It determines the type of inductive argument you are dealing with. Some inductive arguments end up with law-like hypothesis as conclusions. You just saw some of them. For instance, look at these ones. Look at this. This is an inductive argument that ends up with a law-like hypothesis as conclusion. If you say that all men lose strength with age, that's a law-like hypothesis because it refers to all men. So it is an argument that ends up with a law-like hypothesis. It's one type of inductive argument. But there are some inductive arguments that end up with statistical hypotheses as conclusions. For instance, if you say 80% of men lose strength with age, that will be a statistical hypothesis. That's the second type of inductive argument. So both of them are two types of inductive arguments. The ones that end with law-like hypothesis as conclusions, and then the ones that end with statistical hypothesis as conclusions. So let's go back. Okay, so the law-like is highly predictive. The law-like is highly predictive. If you say that all metals expand when heated, and you say X is a metal, it means that X will expand when heated. So the law-like are supposed to be highly predictive. For instance, we saw this example at the bottom. All F's are G's. Each F is a G. No F's are G's. All F's are not G's. Now, law-like is supposed to be highly predictive. G must be attributed or not attributed to every F. If you say all men are mortal and if Peter is a man, then Peter is mortal. Anything that is man is very predictably mortal. But then for the statistical hypothesis, you are not so sure. If you say 90% of those who ate the food fell sick, and then if you say X ate the food, then what you'll be saying is that X is likely to fall sick. X is likely to fall sick. You wouldn't say that X must have fallen sick. Why you can't say it is that you are referring to 90%. You said it is 90% of those who ate the food fell sick. So there are 10% of those who ate the food that didn't fall sick. If you say X ate the food, You are not sure whether X is among the 90% who fell sick, or whether X is among the 10% that did not fall sick. So if you say X ate the food, therefore X fell sick, you are not sure. The more proper thing to say is that X ate the food, so X is likely to fall sick. Or you can say that there are two possible conclusions. You can say X ate the food, therefore X fell sick. And then second conclusion, X ate the food, but X did not fall sick. Those two conclusions are legitimate conclusions, but they are opposites. That's why we say inductive arguments permit more than one conclusion. That's the major difference between inductive arguments and deductive arguments. When you look at a deductive argument, it permits only one conclusion. But when you look at an inductive argument, it permits more than one conclusion. For an inductive argument, if you say 90% of those who ate the food fell sick, if X ate the food, X fell sick. If X ate the food, X did not fall sick. The two conclusions are legitimate. But let's go ahead. We'll see more of that. Now, confirmation versus proof. Inductive arguments are aimed at confirmation, but deductive arguments are aimed at proof. Confirmation is not proof. This confirmation is what is written in the textbook. But what happens in inductive arguments is not even as strong as confirmation. That word was used by an American professor, Helen Lauer, who was here. She was a lady who wrote the textbook. But instead of confirmation, I would rather say support. I would say support because the premises of an inductive arguments can never really confirm. What they do is to support the conclusion. But because their support is not guaranteed, I just use support. But because the word confirmation has been used in the textbook, you can stick to it, at least for the purpose of your examinations, Okay. So two major ways to detect inductive arguments. Inductive arguments are capable of more than one conclusion. If you say 90% of those who ate the food fell sick, and then you say Amma ate the food, look at the following conclusions. Amma fell sick, Amma did not fall sick. Those two conclusions are correct. They are legitimate. So in this argument, you have two legitimate conclusions. I hope you understand that. So
So hello, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Israel. So if I could get you clear, per your explanation, that means deductive arguments have only one conclusion, but inductive arguments have more than one conclusion.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
Okay. But per our earlier discussion, it's like the thing is a little bit confusing. They told us that it also have only one conclusion, but their conclusion dwell on the probability. Their conclusion dwell on the probability, but unlike the deductive argument, their conclusion follow necessarily or absolutely from the premises. But the inductive, they dwell on probability. So that means in most cases, you can also have one or two premises.
Yes, no. Well, I think what you need to do is to use the right words. So what you would rather say. Sorry, let me mute everyone. So I'm coming. Yeah. So what you would rather say is that inductive arguments permit more than one possible conclusion. So you have to use the word possible, because an inductive argument has a conclusion. It will not give you two conclusions, it will give you one conclusion. But what we're saying is that there is more than one possible conclusion. The conclusion that has been stated in an inductive argument is not the only possible conclusion. That is the argument we're making. It is not that when an inductive argument is stated, they will also write two conclusions. No, they won't write two conclusions. They will write a conclusion there. But what we're saying is that if you check it, you will see that there is another possible conclusion. And that is why it is called a probability argument. And that is why it is less certain compared to deductive reasoning. But when you look at deductive reasoning does not permit any other possible conclusion. Only one possible conclusion applies to deductive reasoning. And this is also
all right. Thank you very much for the clarification.
All right, and this is also the simplest way to distinguish between a deductive argument and an inductive argument. Once you look at an argument and you see that it permits only one possible conclusion, then you know it is a deductive argument. But if you are looking at an argument and you see that the conclusion is more than one possible conclusion, then you know it is an inductive argument. And so we also say that inductive arguments are strictly not valid. They are strictly not valid. Only deductive arguments are valid arguments. Did you do validity when you did deductive argument?
Yes.
You did validity?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So inductive arguments are not valid. No inductive argument is valid. You cannot apply validity to inductive arguments.
Hey, sir, please, I can't hear you. Or it's just me?
It's from your network.
Don't worry.
Your network.
If you have a problem, don't worry. You have to watch the recording. So don't worry. Just relax. So inductive arguments are not valid. They are not valid. You can't call them valid arguments. Validity is a mathematical term. It has mathematical significance.
Hello?
Yes. Yes, so, okay. Now, the second way of detecting inductive arguments is that inductive arguments are also extrapolations. Inductive arguments are extrapolations. Extrapolation is an activity that smuggles in information into the conclusion that is absent in any of the premises. An extrapolation is an activity that smuggles in information into the conclusion that is absent in any of the premises. All inductive conclusions contain information that is not accounted in the premises. So there is something in the conclusion that you cannot find in the premises. Let's see examples.
Hello, if anybody can hear me, please, I can't hear anything.
It is your network. Madam, maybe it's your network, so kindly relax. We will post the video so that you watch the video, okay?
You should leave the meeting and join again.
Please.
Leave and join again.
Yeah, simple. Leave and join again.
All right, so we'll continue. So let me mute everyone. Okay, look at this technicality. Look at this technicality. Technicality of induction. Now, a known thing, A, has certain properties such as X, Y, and Z. A has properties X, Y, and Z. Another thing, B, has the same properties X, Y, and Z. Now, A has an additional property Q. So on the basis of the above premises, the argument concludes, in reality extrapolates, that B also has the additional property Q. Now, the idea of induction is that if B is like A in some respects, then B may also be like A in other respects. That's the idea of induction. That's why we say induction is like guesswork or probability. It is just making conjectures. That's what induction is. You see two items, A and B, and the two items have
please,
X,
sorry.
Y. Yes.
Hello, Doc. Please, there are some of our colleagues in the lobby. They've been there for the past 1 hour. So can you kindly allow them in, sir?
Okay, let me see. Lobby. Where do we get that?
So it will automatically allow them.
Yeah, it automatically allows people in. Because I should.
Once you start the meeting, you take control of the who enters and who exits. So maybe if you don't allow that function, it will not work.
Yes, in our very first meeting, there were people in the lobby, but that's not for this class. I think it was for the main campus, and then after that, I went to the system and allowed people in, and I disabled the lobby. So there is no lobby. A lobby does not exist right now. So anyone who has logged in should be here, Let me see, meeting options. When you come to meeting options, you can see who can bypass the lobby, and then the answer is everyone. Are you seeing that?
Yes, sir, we can see that.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so this is where you disable the lobby. Who can bypass the lobby?
Disable.
Everyone. So previously it was only me who can bypass the lobby, until I changed it from only me to everyone. So no one should be in the lobby because a lobby doesn't exist now. All right, so
it will automatically allow them later.
Yes. Okay, so let's move on. Now, so we're saying that inductive argument is an argument that says because A and B, both of them have X, Y, Z, if it is found out that A also has Q, then the conclusion is that B should also have Q. But the problem is that you are not sure. That is why the conclusion is not certain. You can't rely on it. It's not guaranteed. You are just guessing that B would have Q because A has Q, on the basis of the fact that you know previously that both A and B have similar properties. So that's the technicality of induction. That's why we say induction is something like guesswork. Now, and extrapolation is another term for guesswork. Guesswork, speculation, conjecturing, extrapolation, they all mean the same thing. Now, there are several directions of extrapolation. First of all, you have part-whole extrapolation, attributing something to a whole that constitutes a part or parts. That's a part-whole extrapolation. There are two types of part-whole extrapolations. First of all, you have generalizations, and then you have statistical syllogisms. Now, generalization. Now, this is not in your textbook, so I brought it in so that it will be very clear. You will see inductive arguments very clearly. Whenever you see, no matter the type of inductive arguments you see, you know it's an inductive argument. And these are really the types of inductive arguments. Now, the types of extrapolation are also the types of inductive arguments. Now, I was saying there are part-whole extrapolations, attributing something to a whole that constitutes a part or parts. Now, there are two types of part-whole extrapolations. First of all, you have generalizations, and then you have statistical syllogisms. Now, generalization, example, Peter is strong, James is strong, therefore all men are strong. That's a generalization. So you are concluding that all men are strong because Peter and James are strong. You are extrapolating from two men to all men. So that's why we call it a generalization. That's a type of inductive argument. If you look at it very well, you see that you cannot rely on the conclusion. Can you rely on the conclusion? You see, Peter and James are just two men. From two men, you conclude for all men. Now, if you look at the conclusion, you see that there is an information in the conclusion that is not contained in the premises. Sorry, let me mute everyone again. Now, why is it that you cannot rely on this conclusion? The reason is that there is an information in the conclusion that is absent in the premises. What information is that? You look at the conclusion very well. The new information in the conclusion is all men. All men. There is nothing you did in the two premises that comes close to all men. So all men is an information that is absent in the premises, but it is there in the conclusion. So that's why we say you can't rely on the conclusions of inductive arguments. We call this a generalization. And in fact, generalization is called an inductive fallacy. If the generalization is too weak, then it's a fallacy. There are some generalizations that we can permit. If the generalization is strong enough, then it's an inductive argument. It's one of the types of inductive arguments. But if the generalization is too weak like this one, then it's a fallacy. And this one is actually called the fallacy of generalization. Okay. Then you have statistical syllogisms, the second type of part-whole syllogisms. Most Canadian university students drink alcohol. Caroline is a Canadian university student, therefore Caroline drinks alcohol. So this one is to conclude from a more general one to a particular person. You start by saying that most Canadian university students drink alcohol. And then Caroline is one of them, so Caroline drinks alcohol. So this is, if you look at it very well, if you say all Canadian university students drink alcohol, Caroline is a Canadian university student, therefore Caroline drinks alcohol, that's a deductive argument. That's a deductive argument. In that case, there's only one conclusion, and the conclusion is certain. You can't change the conclusion, you see? That would be a deductive argument. But here you have most, not all. Most Canadian university students drink alcohol. Caroline is a Canadian university student, so Caroline drinks alcohol. There's a problem there. What is the problem? The problem is that Caroline might be among those Canadian university students that don't drink alcohol, because you are saying most, so there must be some who don't drink it. You are not sure where Caroline belongs, and therefore the conclusion is not guaranteed. There are more than one possible conclusion. You can also say Caroline doesn't drink alcohol. You can do investigations and then you arrive at the conclusion that Caroline doesn't drink alcohol. So that's why we say inductive arguments permit more than one possible conclusion. So this one is a statistical syllogism. Then you have analogies, arguing that something possesses the same thing as another because they both possess some other properties. Arguing that something possesses the same thing as another because both of them possess some other properties. Example, the structural adjustment program was good for Cameroon, which is a third world country. The structural adjustment program was good for Uganda, which is a third world country. The structural adjustment program was good for Senegal, which is a third world country. The structural adjustment program was good for Nigeria, which is a third world country. Therefore, the structural adjustment program must be good for Togo, which is a third world country. Now, this is an analogy. What we are saying is that Togo must have something that other countries have because they have something else. Now, what we are saying is that this program must be good for Togo because Togo shares another property with all these other countries, and that property is third world country. So you are concluding on the basis of that they are all third world countries to say that what worked well in one of them would work well in the others. That is the basis for reaching the conclusion. But do you think that that basis is enough? Do you think that it is a guarantee for the accuracy of the conclusion?
No, it's not
Yeah,
enough.
so this is an example of an analogy. We said it's analogies, arguing that something possesses the same thing as another because they both possess some other properties. They are called, such arguments are called analogies. You know. Yeah, so that's how analogies go. Then you have predictions. Attributing a quality to a future event because of the level of frequency of past occurrences of the same quality in similar events. Attributing a quality to a future event because of the level of frequency of past occurrences of the same quality in similar events. For instance, Tyson has won his last 30 boxing fights. Conclusion, therefore, Tyson will win his next boxing fight. So what is the basis of the conclusion? The basis of the conclusion is that he has won 30 boxing fights up to the last one. So that becomes the basis for concluding that he will win the next one. But the question is whether that basis is enough. Is it not possible that something could happen that could disrupt that history? So the conclusion is not entirely guaranteed. And in fact, at the end of the fight, the conclusion could be that he did not win. So there is more than one possible conclusion. Or you can say that at any rate, this conclusion does not have full certainty. So predictions are also a type of inductive argument. Okay, so we've seen different directions of extrapolation. We've seen part-whole extrapolations, and in part-whole extrapolations, we saw generalization, we saw statistical syllogisms, then we saw analogies, how analogies work, and then we saw predictions. So when you see any of those kinds of arguments, automatically you know you are looking at an inductive argument. Now let's look at two kinds of inductive arguments based on their strength. Two kinds of inductive arguments based on strength. We call them enumerative inductive arguments. Now, an enumerative argument is an argument with many premises. You know, enumerating the premises like a list. An argument with many premises, the premises look like a list. That's why we call it an enumerative argument. The first kind is arguments with a law-like hypothesis as conclusion. So let's look at it. And then the second type is arguments that have a statistical hypothesis as conclusion. Earlier on, I had told you that there are two broad kinds of inductive arguments. You have the ones with law-like hypothesis as conclusions, and then you have those inductive arguments with statistical hypothesis as conclusions. Now remember that each of these categories contain all the types of extrapolation. You know. Okay, so for the law-like hypothesis, let's look at an example. Premise 1, gold expanded when heated. 2, silver expanded when heated. Bronze expanded when heated. Copper expanded when heated. Aluminum expanded when heated. Platinum expanded when heated. Brass expanded when heated. And so on. Lead, iron, zinc expanded when heated. So we have 10 metals that expanded when heated. And then a summary of the 10 premises, or you can call it the summary premise, is that all the metals tested so far expanded when heated. And then the conclusion is that all metals expand when heated. All metals expand when heated. You know. Now, if you look at this argument, you see that there is a serious disagreement. All the 10 premises are particular statements. statements referring to particular metals. And then even the summary premise is a summary of all the particular statements. So the summary premise is also a particular statement because it refers to all the metals tested so far. All the metals tested so far is a finite reference class, a class of countable items. So the statement is a particular statement. But the conclusion is a general statement, a statement with infinite reference class. Infinite reference class, all metals. So you have a disagreement between the premises and the summary premise, which are all particular statements, and then the conclusion, which is a general statement. And then the question is whether the premises and even the summary premise can warrant the conclusion about all metals. So let's look at this. Look at the technicality. Premises 1 to 10 are verifiable of particular statements. And even the summary premise is a summation of all the verifiable premises. But the conclusion is a confirmable or general statement. Now, the argument is strictly invalid because it is jumping from verifiable to confirmable statements. And that's the reason why confirmation is not proof and inductive arguments are not valid. Now, in fact, the conclusion is false, actually, because some metals, in fact, do not expand when heated. They are called superconductors. They do not absorb heat, therefore they do not expand. So the conclusion is false, and all the premises are true. So this is an argument where the premises are all true, but the conclusion is false. So it is possible to deny the conclusion with all true premises, or to affirm the premises and deny the conclusion. And that's applicable to all types of extrapolation, part whole, analogies, and predictions. You can have true premises and false conclusion. Of course, by now it is clear to you, because if an argument has more than one possible conclusion, then it is only one of those conclusions that will be true. The other one will be false. And it is possible that the one that is false is actually the one that is stated. Or it is possible that the one that is stated is actually the one that is false. So that's that about the technicality of inductive arguments. And the whole idea is to try to show you how it differs from deductive argument. By now it is clear to you that inductive arguments cannot be relied upon.
So please, I want to ask a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So please, I want to ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
My question is that universal statement.
Yes.
Does that mean that all universal statements start with that statement, but in inductive they conclude?
Yeah, your background was very loud. Continue.
Yeah, I was asking about the universal statement.
Yes.
When all universal statements, can we say that all universal statements start in deductive and then in inductive they conclude?
Where you are likely to find universal statements in deductive arguments is as one of the premises. That's why you see all men are mortal. It's a universal statement. So for deductive arguments, you are likely to find universal statement in among the premises, But for inductive arguments, you can sometimes find universal statements as a conclusion. That's what we call the law-like hypothesis as conclusion. Like the one we just did. That's a conclusion that is a universal statement, But it is not always, So you might see a deductive argument that has no universal statement at all. And you might see an inductive argument that has no universal statement at all. So it is possible for a deductive argument to completely lack universal statements, and also it is possible for an inductive argument to also lack universal statements. But when you see universal statements in any of them, it is likely to be among the premises in a deductive argument or among the conclusion in an inductive argument. Inductive argument. It will be more difficult to see a universal statement as a premise in an inductive argument. Because if you see a universal statement as a premise in an inductive argument, then it might convert it to a deductive argument. Because if you attribute something to all members of a class as a premise in an inductive argument, then it is more likely to land you with one possible conclusion. So you could see universal statements in both types of argument, but for deductive arguments, I think it is more common to see it as one of the premises. And then for inductive argument, it's more common to see it as a conclusion.
I want to know this one too. In terms of deductive, if you don't see it in the deductive, then it is an antinomy, right?
Antinomy?
Oh, antinomy.
No, the thing is, you mustn't see it. It's not a must. For instance, you can have, how do we call it? I don't know. We needed to assemble a lot of examples of deductive arguments so that we can see those that might not have universal statements. But the point is that it's not. You mustn't find universal statements in any of those arguments. It's something that is, it's not a must. So I think the important thing for you is to find out how each of those arguments work, not whether there are universal statements in them. And wherever you find universal statements in them, how it affects the argument. You can see how universal statements affect deductive argument. If you say all men are mortal and you say Kofi is a man, then Kofi is mortal. That's a deductive argument. But if you see universal statements in inductive arguments, you can see how it works. If you say some metals expanded when heated, therefore all metals expand when heated, you can see that the conclusion is not really guaranteed because you cannot really test all metals. So you don't need to be focused on where you can find universal statements.
Sir.
Yes.
Sir. Yeah, with that example that if all metal expand when heated. See, when we talk of all metal expand when heated, maybe we're talking of maybe a metal could be found in the future that cannot be hot. As when heated, that cannot be found.
Yes. So there is a possibility. There is a possibility of a future metal that doesn't expand.
Exactly.
Yes. So we're saying that concluding about all metals on the basis of 10 metals is not is not a very confident exercise. So the argument is strictly not valid. You can't say the argument is valid because you haven't tested all metals. Okay, so now let's look at some advantages and disadvantages of deductive and inductive arguments. Now we have the issue of accuracy versus providing information. Deductive arguments are accurate at the expense of the inability to provide information. Now, already we know that accuracy is a quality of deductive arguments. But it comes at a cost. Examples. Either it is raining or it is not raining. You must have seen this in disjunctive syllogism. Either it is raining or it is not raining. Now, this sentence, is it accurate? Of course, it's accurate. There is no situation in which the sentence is not accurate. This sentence is always accurate, irrespective of the context. If it is raining, then it is accurate. If it is not raining, then it is accurate. Therefore, it is always accurate. But does it provide you with information about whether it is raining? It does not. So it doesn't tell you it is raining. Therefore, it is accurate at the expense of providing information. Now, this is just a minute example, but what we're saying is that deductive arguments are not very good in providing you with extra information. Now, look at example 2. If it is raining, then someone will get wet. If it is raining, someone will get wet. Now, that's a conditional statement. If it is raining, someone will get wet. Now, there's no way you can say it is inaccurate, because anytime it rains, someone must get wet. Not everyone would be able to avoid all the drops of rain. Yeah. So the sentence is accurate in all situations. But does it tell you that it is raining? It doesn't provide you with any information about raining. It doesn't tell you that it is raining. So it does not provide you with information. It is accurate at the expense of providing information. So examples 1 and 2 are examples of sentences that are accurate at the expense of providing information. Then we can go to sentence 3. Now, inductive arguments provide information at the expense of accuracy. Inductive arguments provide information at the expense of accuracy. Now, providing information is to be falsifiable. Any information is falsifiable. Falsifiability applies to information. Example, it is raining right now. It is raining right now. It's a falsifiable statement. Because if it is not raining right now where I am staying, then for me, the information is false. It has been falsified. If it is raining right now at your end and you are looking at the statement, then it is true. If it is not raining right now at your end and you are looking at the statement, then it is false. So information is falsifiable. Of course, you could see that examples 1 and 2 are not falsifiable. The disjunctive syllogism is not falsifiable. The conditional statement we saw is not falsifiable, but this one is falsifiable. What we're saying is that any attempt to provide information, especially empirical information, is falsifiable. Falsifiability applies to factual or empirical information. And like I told you, inductive arguments are in the realm of empirical exercises, scientific and empirical exercises. Now, any valuable empirical information must be falsifiable. Any statement that is not falsifiable cannot be a verifiable or confirmable statement. Any statement that is absolutely true has no empirical content. So that's falsifiability and science. Now, the more valuable the empirical information, the more falsifiable. If you provide an empirical information that has more value than another one, the one with more value is more falsifiable than the one with less value. Okay, look at this. The empirical statement, it rains every fourth Friday of the month, is more valuable information than it rained just now. So you have two empirical information here. The one that tells you it rains every third Friday of the month is more valuable compared to the one that says it rained just now. Why is it more valuable? Because you can do more things with the one that says it rains every third Friday of the month, more than the one that says it rained just now. If you know that it is gonna rain every third Friday of the month, there's much more that you can achieve with that. It can have a bigger impact on your life. You can rearrange your program. You can reprogram your activities in a way that it will not affect them. But you cannot do that with the second information. It rained just now. So the more valuable, some empirical statements are more valuable than others. But we're saying that the more valuable, the more falsifiable. Only one third Friday of the month. It will take only one third Friday of not raining to falsify the first statement. So if there is any particular Friday, third Friday of the month that it doesn't rain, then automatically it is falsified. So the more valuable, the more falsifiable. Now let's look at the second type of inductive arguments, arguments with statistical hypothesis as conclusion. So you have this argument, you can look.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, this is right again. It's like I'm worrying you today.
Don't worry.
About the disjunctive syllogism.
Yes,
Look,
yes.
there's like the example that the way you explained it, I didn't get it well. So I wanted to cite an example so that it's easy to explain it, whether I can get a fair idea about the whole thing. So if you say either the students are learning mathematics or logic, it has been discovering that the students are not learning mathematics, therefore they are learning logic. Is it an example of disjunctive syllogism?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so explaining that, how do you explain that?
Yeah, so we are saying that it doesn't give you as much information as an inductive argument, because the information in that argument is that it is either they are learning mathematics or they are learning logic. So if the argument shows you they are not learning mathematics, then automatically they are learning logic. Now, learning mathematics and learning logic are the only two pieces of information you gain from that argument. But if an inductive argument tells you that 10 metals have been tested, and then on the basis of that, the conclusion is that all metals expand when heated. It gives you much more information compared to an argument that tells you that some students somewhere are learning either mathematics or logic. So what we're saying is that inductive arguments, what inductive arguments try to do is to try to provide you with more information that is not contained in the premises. But they normally do that at the expense of accuracy. We have already said earlier that inductive arguments try to smuggle some information that is absent in any of the premises into the conclusion. Somehow, they smuggle it into the conclusion, and then it becomes an argument with the conclusion. Now, that information that has been smuggled in, that is not absent in any of the premises, is an attempt to give you more information about the world. But of course, you know, deductive arguments don't do that. And the reason deductive arguments don't do that because they don't want to suffer from inaccuracy. Sorry, let me mute everyone. So what we're saying is that when you attempt to provide more information, you do that at the expense of accuracy. And you can see how inductive arguments do it. They try to give you more information compared to deductive arguments, but they do it at the expense of accuracy, because when you smuggle an information into the conclusion that is not in any of the premises, then you are doing so at the expense of accuracy. But for deductive arguments, they will not smuggle any information into the conclusion that is not in the premises. So the deductive arguments try to be accurate, but they do that at the expense of not being able to provide you with more information about the world. The only information deductive arguments will provide you are those that are already contained in the premises. And remember that premises exist before the argument itself. You know, premises exist before the argument. Premises talk about things that exist before you start making the argument. So if the conclusion of an argument doesn't tell you anything more than what is in the premises, then that argument has not really given you more information that you had before the argument. Do you understand that?
Sure.
Yeah, so deductive arguments do not advance your knowledge of the world more than you already know. They only try to keep you in a perimeter of accuracy. Now, inductive arguments try to help you with more knowledge. But in order to do that, they have to step outside the perimeter of accuracy to do it. Sometimes they are correct, sometimes they are incorrect. And you see, the inductive arguments they are quite good, because when they smuggle in such information into the conclusion that is not in any of the premises, sometimes it ends up correct, but sometimes it doesn't end up correct. Now, because of those instances where it ends up correct, that's the value of inductive arguments. I hope you understand that.
Yes, sir.
So, in spite of the fact that inductive arguments are extrapolations, sometimes they succeed in giving you information, even though you don't need complete accuracy to be getting the information. But at least in some instances, you end up getting some quantity of information at the end of the day, and the whole scientific enterprise is an inductive exercise. The whole scientific exercise, and you can look at what science has given us in the last 2 centuries. It is so much. So you cannot really deny the value of inductive arguments. They are quite valuable. What we're saying is that they suffer accuracy, but when you check what we get from them, sometimes, then you cannot really dismiss them entirely. Okay, so look at this one, this example, the statistical inductive arguments with statistical hypothesis as a conclusion. Now look at this example. Premise 1, Michael was vaccinated for polio. But before we look at the premises, look at the conclusion. The conclusion is a statistical hypothesis. A statistical hypothesis. It's not a law-like hypothesis like all metals expand when heated. Now, the conclusion is that polio vaccination has 80% potential of preventing polio. So that's a statistical hypothesis. Now, let's look at how the argument works. Premise 1, Michael was vaccinated for polio and never suffered polio. Premise 2, Gilbert was vaccinated for polio and suffered polio. Mary was vaccinated for polio and never suffered polio. Stanley was vaccinated for polio and never suffered polio. James was vaccinated for polio and never suffered. Bob was vaccinated and suffered it. Jill was vaccinated and never suffered. Samuel never suffered. John never suffered. Caroline never suffered. So The summary premise is that 8 out of the 10 people who were vaccinated for polio did not suffer polio. So 8 out of 10 didn't suffer after vaccination. So the conclusion is that polio vaccination has 80% potential of preventing polio. After all, it prevented 80% of those who were vaccinated from suffering it again. Now, so you can see the conclusion is a statistical hypothesis. So now you can contrast this to the one with Lowlight hypothesis as conclusion. All metals expand when heated. So you can see the difference. This particular type is more modest. It is more prudent. And anyone who is serious is more likely to use this. So this is the type you'll be getting more commonly because you can defend it more than you defend the argument with law-like hypothesis as a conclusion. In fact, it is very difficult to defend inductive arguments with law-like hypothesis as conclusions. So we have two types of inductive arguments: the ones ending with law-like hypothesis as conclusions, and the ones ending with statistical hypothesis as conclusions. These hypotheses are technically regarded as conclusions of inductive arguments because they are confirmable statements to be supported, confirmed, or denied by verifiable statements. So I think this wraps up our treatment of inductive arguments. So we can see how inductive arguments differ from deductive arguments. By the time I post you the video of my teaching on deductive arguments, then you can compare it to what we did here. In fact, you can watch both videos. You can watch the one on deductive arguments and then watch this one on inductive arguments. Then you see the flow of the two classes. So at this point, I would entertain any questions before we round up.
I want to ask one question to you.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
So please, my question is about deductive. I'm now realizing that we have two types of deductive. What of deductive? Is it only about syllogism, or there is another type of deductive?
In your last class, you must have done the 4 types of deductive arguments. You have modus ponens, modus tollens, hypothetical syllogism, and disjunctive syllogism. So those are the 4 types of deductive arguments. Now, to explain the type is automatically a 2-hour class. So you have to watch the video to understand it. Any other questions? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Please, the video, are you going to put it on the WhatsApp group or the Sakai?
I'll put it on both.
Sir, if I may ask, do you have any video on the 4 hypotheses? Because I think you come clear here. You are clear here, so we would like to watch that video.
You mean the 4 types of deductive arguments?
Yes, no. I'm talking of the 4 types of syllogistic argument, like the modus ponens, modus tollens, and I mean the 4 of them. If you have video on that,
they are all deductive arguments.
Yeah, that's the class. That's the class on deductive argument.
Okay.
So you're gonna get it along with this video.
Hello, sir. Hello, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
With the question that the first colleague asked, he was asking us, we are having type inductive arguments, which is the the law-like hypothesis.
Yes.
But I think what the one that you were mentioning, the modus ponens, hypothetical syllogism, and then disjunctive. I think they are the types of syllogism that we are having. But it's like I wanted to know whether we are having different types of inductive argument. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there is a confusion of terms. Syllogism. Now, I don't know what you guys did when you started your class on arguments, but another name for an argument is a syllogism. So a syllogism is also called an argument. So it means that not only deductive arguments are syllogisms, inductive arguments are also called syllogisms. Any argument is a syllogism, as long as it has premises and conclusion. So when the modus ponens, tollens, hypothetical syllogism, and the hypothetical syllogism and the disjunctive syllogism, they are types of deductive syllogisms or deductive arguments. So they are not just types of syllogisms, they are types of deductive syllogisms or deductive arguments.
Okay. So it means deductive argument and syllogism. That is syllogism, they are all the same.
Yes, deductive arguments or deductive syllogisms, or you can, and you also have inductive arguments or inductive syllogisms. So syllogisms apply to anything that is an argument, whether it is deductive or inductive. So when you talk about modus ponens, tollens, hypothetical syllogism, disjunctive syllogisms, they are types of deductive arguments or syllogisms. Arguments or syllogisms.
As a valid argument.
Yes, they are valid arguments. They are the four types of valid arguments or valid syllogisms.
Sure. Okay.
Then for the inductive arguments, you have those with law-like hypothesis as conclusions, and then those with statistical hypothesis as conclusions.
Okay.
Thank you.
And you know that inductive arguments are not valid arguments.
Sure.
So I'm gonna end this recording so that I can retrieve it and post it to your Sakai site, and then send a copy to your tutor to give it to you on your WhatsApp group.
Okay, sir.
And by doing that, I'm gonna do the two of them. I'll be sending both the deductive and the inductive.
Yes, sir.
So I would advise you guys to make out time to watch both. See if you can watch. You start with the deductive, and from the deductive you go to the inductive, so that you can do it in a logical sequence and get it very well.
All right, sir.
Okay, sir.
Thank you so much.
All right. So until next week, I wish all of you a very fruitful week.
Sir, when are you sending?
I'm sending it right now.
About
Thank
our
you, sir.